The hospital corridor was filled with the bright warmth of the afternoon sun pouring through the tall glass windows, yet one man sat alone as though the light could never reach him. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes carried weeks of sleepless nights, and his trembling hands held the tiny pink shoe of his 6-year-old daughter. Every passing second felt heavier than the last. Then, without warning, a smiling nurse stopped in front of an elegant woman who had just arrived and quietly whispered, "Your husband is amazing." What happened next stunned everyone within earshot. The woman looked at the exhausted single father sitting nearby and calmly replied that he was not her husband. The truth that followed left the father completely speechless and changed both of their lives forever. Before we begin this unforgettable story, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who still believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad if you believe that one act of compassion can change a person's entire life. Mason Whitaker had once believed that hard work could solve almost every problem. Every morning before sunrise he delivered supplies for a local logistics company, and every evening he hurried home to care for his daughter, Hazel. After losing his wife, Nora, to a sudden illness 3 years earlier, he had become both father and mother to the little girl who still slept every night hugging her mother's old knitted blanket. Mason never complained because he believed that his daughter deserved a childhood filled with hope instead of sorrow. Even when bills piled higher than his paycheck and sleep became a luxury, he smiled for Hazel because she smiled back. Life had become a careful balance of impossible choices. Some weeks Mason skipped meals so Hazel could enjoy fresh fruit in her lunchbox. His shoes were worn thin, and his old pickup truck rattled every mile, but he always managed to arrive on time wherever his daughter needed him. Teachers admired his dedication, neighbors quietly respected his determination, and even strangers often noticed how gently he spoke to Hazel. Yet behind every smile hid a fear that someday he would fail the only person who truly depended on him. That fear became real one bright Tuesday afternoon when Hazel collapsed during an art class at school. Mason received the phone call while unloading heavy boxes at work. He abandoned everything and raced to the hospital with his heart pounding harder than the engine of his aging truck. Doctors soon discovered that Hazel had developed a severe infection that required immediate treatment and careful monitoring. Although they assured him she would recover, the following days would be critical. From that moment Mason barely left the hospital. He slept in uncomfortable waiting room chairs, washed his face in public restrooms, and lived on vending machine coffee while holding his daughter's hand through every fever and every restless night. Nurses watched him read fairy tales until sunrise, braid Hazel's hair the best he could, and whisper encouraging words whenever she woke frightened. He never asked anyone for sympathy. His only request was always the same. He simply wanted his little girl to get better. The hospital staff quietly admired him. They had seen many families come and go, but there was something extraordinary about the quiet strength of this exhausted father. He thanked every nurse, remembered every doctor's name, and comforted other worried parents whenever he found a moment to breathe. Even while carrying his own burden, he somehow noticed the pain in others. On the 5th afternoon, sunlight flooded the children's ward, bringing warmth into rooms that had felt cold with worry. Hazel finally smiled for the first time in days after finishing a small bowl of soup. The doctors believed the worst had passed. Relief washed over Mason so suddenly that tears escaped before he could stop them. He lowered his head, overwhelmed by gratitude. At that very moment a distinguished woman entered the pediatric floor surrounded by quiet professionalism rather than loud attention. Her name was Evelyn Mercer, founder and chief executive officer of one of the country's largest healthcare technology companies. She had arrived to inspect a new partnership with the hospital but insisted on walking through the children's ward without photographers or media. She wanted to see the hospital through the eyes of patients rather than executives. As Evelyn passed Hazel's room, one of the veteran nurses smiled warmly and softly remarked, "Your husband is amazing." The nurse had noticed Evelyn pause several times during previous visits to watch Mason care for Hazel with incredible devotion and had naturally assumed they were together. Evelyn looked toward the tired father sitting beside the hospital bed before answering with complete calm. She explained that the man was not her husband and that she had never even met him. She simply couldn't stop noticing how faithfully he had cared for his daughter every single day. Then she added something that silenced everyone nearby. She said that the world often celebrates successful people with expensive titles, but real greatness is measured by the sacrifices nobody applauds. According to her, the man sitting beside that little girl was already richer in character than many people who owned private jets and skyscrapers. Mason overheard every word. Embarrassed, he stood and apologized for attracting attention, insisting he was only doing what any parent would do. Evelyn gently smiled because she knew that statement was both humble and painfully untrue. She had witnessed countless parents disappear under pressure while this man never left his daughter's side. Instead of continuing her inspection, Evelyn asked hospital staff about Mason's situation. They quietly explained that he had nearly exhausted his paid leave from work, worried constantly about medical expenses, and had no close family nearby to help. Yet despite everything, he refused charity and always tried to pay every bill himself. The information stayed with Evelyn long after she left the hospital. That evening she sat alone in her office overlooking the city skyline. Her schedule was filled with mergers, financial reports, and board meetings, but she could not stop thinking about the father whose greatest achievement was loving his daughter without expecting recognition. Success had given Evelyn wealth beyond imagination, but it had also left her lonely after years devoted entirely to business. Seeing Mason reminded her of values she feared the corporate world had forgotten. The next morning she quietly returned to the hospital carrying no cameras, assistants, or publicity team. She simply brought breakfast for Mason and Hazel. At first Mason hesitated, uncomfortable accepting anything from a stranger, but Evelyn insisted that kindness did not create debt. It created hope. Over the following days they spoke during Hazel's recovery. Mason shared stories about bedtime adventures, school science projects, and the promise he had made to his late wife that Hazel would always know she was deeply loved. Evelyn listened more than she spoke. She realized that despite possessing extraordinary business intelligence, she still had much to learn about courage. When Hazel was finally discharged, Mason prepared to return to ordinary life. Unfortunately, ordinary life welcomed him with another painful surprise. His employer informed him that his extended absence had forced the company to replace his position. Although they appreciated his years of loyalty, business could not wait. In a single conversation he lost the income that kept his small family afloat. Mason walked out carrying a cardboard box filled with personal belongings while wondering how he would pay rent next month. He refused to let Hazel see his despair. Instead, he smiled, held her hand, and promised everything would somehow be okay, even though he had no idea how. Several days later an unexpected envelope arrived at his apartment. Inside was an invitation requesting that he visit the headquarters of Mercer Health Innovations. Confused and convinced there had been some mistake, Mason arrived wearing his only pressed shirt. Evelyn welcomed him personally. She explained that during her conversations with hospital staff she had learned about his background in logistics, inventory management, and team leadership. Her company desperately needed someone trustworthy to oversee a new community outreach program delivering medical supplies to rural clinics. Skills could be taught, she explained, but integrity could not. She believed Mason possessed the one quality every successful organization needed. Mason could barely speak. After months of feeling invisible, someone had seen not only his hardship but also his worth. He accepted the opportunity with quiet gratitude, promising to work harder than ever before. The new position transformed more than his finances. It restored his confidence. Mason coordinated life-saving deliveries to underserved communities, earning respect through honesty and compassion. Employees quickly noticed that unlike many managers, he knew everyone's name, listened before making decisions, and never asked others to do work he wouldn't gladly do himself. Hazel flourished as well. Her health steadily improved, and she proudly told classmates that her father helped hospitals care for children everywhere. Every evening they still shared simple dinners, homework sessions, and laughter around the small kitchen table. Their apartment remained modest, but it became filled with something money could never purchase: peace. Months later the hospital organized a celebration honoring volunteers, donors, and healthcare workers. Mason attended only because Hazel wanted to thank the nurses who had cared for her. During the ceremony the head nurse stepped onto the stage and unexpectedly shared the story of the exhausted father who had reminded an entire hospital what unconditional love looked like. The audience rose in a standing ovation before Mason even realized they were applauding him. Tears filled his eyes as he looked toward Hazel, whose proud smile shone brighter than any spotlight. Evelyn remained quietly in the background, satisfied that the greatest investment she had ever made had never appeared on a financial statement. She later admitted that meeting Mason had changed her leadership forever. Her company launched new employee support programs for single parents, expanded family medical assistance, and encouraged managers to value compassion as highly as performance. One father's quiet example had influenced thousands of lives. Years later people often asked Mason how he had survived the darkest chapter of his life. He never spoke about luck or miracles. Instead, he said that hope arrives when ordinary people choose to notice someone else's struggle. A nurse had spoken a few simple words. A stranger had decided to care. Those small moments had rewritten the future of a father and his daughter. If this story has touched your heart, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad so more inspiring stories of love, sacrifice, and second chances can reach families around the world. Special request: please comment with the words, "Kindness always finds a way," if you believe that even the smallest act of compassion can change someone's life forever. As the afternoon sun settled gently beyond the hospital windows, Mason held Hazel's hand while they walked toward a future that once seemed impossible. They did not leave carrying wealth or fame. They carried something far more valuable. They carried proof that the strongest people are often the quietest, the greatest heroes rarely wear medals, and sometimes a single sentence spoken at exactly the right moment can open the door to an entirely new life. In a world that often rushes past invisible struggles, kindness remains the one gift capable of turning despair into hope, strangers into family, and ordinary days into unforgettable miracles.